Good morning, I'm Becky Adams, and this is my son, Rob. Well, to begin with, in January of 22, we were forced to sell our home. But then the pressure really came when we did sell the home, and I thought, oh man, where are we going to move? We have this big home, and now we're going to have to find someplace. And so then I started praying, Lord, just remove this from me. Somehow let us keep our home. Let us stay here. But it didn't happen. So then the pressure came again. March the 3rd was time for us to move. And just a couple days before we were getting ready to move, my husband collapsed in the bank and was hospitalized. The pressure was immense at that point because his health was so declining. He has had heart trouble and had kidney problems, just all kinds of heart or lung problems. And so it was hard to bring him home, along with he was in the first stages of dementia, and all this confusion in the house it was really rough.
The burden really was completely on her. The family, we all tried to help as much as we could, but I just was starting to see pretty significant signs of all of the stress manifesting in her, just in her facial expressions and in her ability. I had never seen my mom struggle like this, so that was really hard. When you think about everything that was going on, it just led back to the same kind of prayer of like, enough's enough. We need this to stop. I need you to step in and fix it. This is a burning bush moment. I need you to speak and make this go away.
And at that point, I just didn't feel like I could even pray, Lord, I don't know what's going on, just remove this from me. But I just couldn't. I couldn't pray right. I just couldn't. But I knew there were many praying around me, family and friends. That was a rough time.
Yeah.
May 12th changed my life forever, not in a good way. It was a day that just kept on giving and going, but not in a good way. I learned that the insurance department of insurance was asking for an interview with Tom. Well, due to his ill health, he couldn't make a trip to Columbus, so I set him up on video in the office at our house. He was being investigated for some illegal acts that he had done as a business professional in the insurance industry, and I had no idea. I had no idea what he had done, and it had been going on for many years.
The multiple criminal charges that were coming, the felony level activity, all the legal stuff was coming, was overwhelming. But in that moment, what I remember most is the man that I've called my dad for the last 30 years, I have no idea who he is. I never really knew him. Every memory that I have of him is now called into question. Was any of it real? Was everything he ever said a lie? I was angry. I felt really betrayed. I was really angry on her behalf of how he betrayed her. Every memory I've ever had of him has been either destroyed or tainted in some way. So again, we start praying like, enough's enough. You got to make this stop. We can't take any more of this. But it kept going.
So on May 17th, I got a letter from the Department of Insurance that said they were going to ask me to surrender my license because of the actions of Tom. And I thought, if I lose my license, he's going to lose his for sure. If I lose mine, we lose our total ability for income. And I was so angry that I was having to deal with all this stuff when it was his actions that promoted it. You know, in my head, I know God's in control, and I knew he had a plan bigger than me, but I just couldn't see it at that point.
Pastor Jacob rearranged his schedule and met me that day. He came here and we talked for quite a long time, and he helped pray over this situation because I didn't know how to anymore. I was starting to get a little annoyed actually with God of, why aren't you making this go away? I'm continuing to serve you at Cornerstone, and Mom's continuing to serve you, and even pointing us when we're angry back to you through her own anger. That's the kind of faith a lot of people pray for. How can this happen to her?
May 19th, I met with a friend that's a lawyer and told her what was going on. And she said, I'm going to recommend, because this is over my head, you need a criminal lawyer. And I was like blown away that now I need a criminal lawyer. So we go, she went with me and we met with this criminal lawyer. And after that meeting, the criminal lawyer said to me, well, you really need a civil lawyer for this case as well. Well, in my head, all I'm seeing is dollar signs because I know these two guys aren't cheap. I was really not feeling well at all. And I went to lunch with my girlfriends on 22nd. And we get to lunch, and all of a sudden, I just started shaking. And I mean, I was shaking from my head to my toes. And the girls are like, what's going on? What's wrong? Well, my girlfriends all knew what was happening, and I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I thought, this is it. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. But they rushed me off to the hospital and found out that I had sepsis. And so I was very, very sick and was in the hospital for about 5 days.
So at this point, Mom's in the hospital. They're still trying to get settled into the new house. Tom's there with the early stages of dementia. Everybody in the family is so angry with him at what he did. It was hard trying to find anybody that wanted to stay there and help care for him because he couldn't care for himself. We didn't want to leave him alone, but we didn't want to be in the house with him. So I started calling his family to see if anyone would be willing to come in and help or take him to their place. And we had learned this isn't the first time that this has happened. This happened in a previous marriage with him and with his previous children. And so his family wanted nothing to do with him. So the full burden was on us as a family and on a mom who was in the hospital, who was so sick she was barely conscious for the first couple of days. And once again, I'm trying to pray and I'm trying to keep my faith, but I don't know where to go at this point. It's becoming very overwhelming. And that old bitterness that I used to feel before I started coming back to Cornerstone, before I started back into a faith journey again, I really felt it starting to kind of creep in again. You know, I heard a lot of stuff in my head of, you're trying to give so much time to serve and look what it's doing. It doesn't accomplish anything. You're giving all of this time and all of this energy to God, and look what he's doing to you. Look what he's doing to your mom. And I know that that's not God doing it. That's the sin of Tom. But when you spend 20 years out of church because you haven't ever had a good experience with it, it's easy for those things to come back in. At that point, I contacted Pastor Brenda, and she and I were having a conversation She said, it's okay to be angry. Just make sure you don't sin in your anger. And it's such a simple statement, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like all of these thoughts, this is the enemy coming at me. All the progress that I've made and all of the things that I've done to try and build up my faith and become more like Jesus, he's trying to tear it down through what's happening to my mom.
On June 23rd, Tom finally had a final diagnosis of his dementia. And the doctor was so concerned about it at that point. She said, I'm going to write a letter to the state recommending that his license is suspended. And I knew that was not going to bode well, and he was very stubborn about that. You know, not only having dementia, we've got alcohol involved in this. And so every time he left the house, I was mortified. And so we tried to take the car from him, and that didn't work. And it was just unbelievable pressure we were under. And that's what I was praying, Lord, help me with this now. Just remove this pressure from my life. And, I didn't know how to deal with him, with this dementia and his stubbornness to continue in his activities. And a lot of the feelings when he passed away then unexpectedly on October the 30th, I felt pity, remorse, anger. But the one thing I didn't feel at that point was grief, and I was so disturbed by my own feelings. I sought out a Christian counselor at that point, and she said, well, you're dealing with so much anger right now, give yourself a little grace. So now I'm praying, Lord, forgive me for not leaning on you more, even though many around me are still blanketing me with prayer. All I can think is, he left me with this mess to clean up, something I knew nothing about, but you knew. And when I lost my home, you knew. I needed a smaller place that I could afford, and I couldn't see that. I would have never been able to afford that home. You knew the lawyers that I needed to help me get through this time and help me through this mess. You knew my family would step up and care for me, and my grandchildren would step up and be there beside him when I couldn't. You knew every step of the way what was coming and the outcome of every action that was taken, but I couldn't get past the pressure I was still under.
So at this point, I'm really struggling with the amount of anger that I'm dealing with. The anger that I have towards Tom, the anger that I have towards the memories that have been destroyed, the anger that I have towards everything that my mom's having to deal with because of him. I came to a rehearsal here and was talking to Rachel. She was asking me how everything was going, and I told her, I said, I'm supposed to love like Jesus. I'm supposed to forgive like Jesus. How do I do that for someone who has betrayed my mom and betrayed our family in every conceivable way? And I'll never forget what she said to me, and it's kind of become a daily prayer for me. She said, when you can't love like Jesus, just make sure you love Jesus. So my prayer over the last several months that I just keep repeating over and over again is, Jesus, I love you. Help me to love like you. Jesus, I love you. Help me to love like you. Because I'm not there yet. And I'm still not there yet, because this is still an ongoing issue. But that at least helps me when I get those attacks in my ear from the enemy telling me that this is God doing something to your family. This is God punishing you for something that you don't even realize. this is God allowing something to happen to your mom that she doesn't deserve, I have to keep my focus on Jesus because it's the only way that I can make it through this.
Well, in January of 2023, I was here at the church and Pastor Jacob preached a sermon about under pressure. And it was a life-changing experience for me and for some of my family. Even though I had those pressures, I started to change and stop asking God to remove those pressures from me, but asking God to show me what was the purpose, how it can be used, and direct me in a different path. Because at that point, I don't know, it was like that pressure just dissolved from me because I had turned it over to the Lord fully, and He's made me see that some of those things that I went through in that past year were for my benefit, not to harm me, but for my benefit. And yes, it's still an ongoing prayer, and I can't thank Cornerstone enough for the prayers, the prayer warriors, for all the people that have sent me cards of encouragement. It's just been an unbelievable experience to be in this church family.
That message that Pastor Jacob preached really was transformational for me and for Mom, and I know my sister, for the whole family. It changed my perspective. It changed my prayer life. This whole time I've been praying, God, you got to take this away. You have to make this stop. We can't take any more. It's changed my prayers to, even though I don't understand all of it, and even though it's still going on, now I'm praying, what are you trying to teach me in this? What are you trying to grow in me? I think the thing that stood out to me the most in Pastor Jacob's sermon that day was that God uses pressure in our lives to produce.
Yes.
And what He's producing in me is a stronger desire to grow my faith. A desire to be even more involved in Cornerstone, because I've seen how this community has rallied around my mom and around me, and I want to be a part of that for somebody else.
Yes.
I still don't know exactly what all is going to be produced off of this, but I know that He's faithful. And I know that this isn't something that God did to us. This isn't something that He allowed to us because of something bad that happened or something that we're being punished for. This is something that He's going to use at some point for His purpose to further His own kingdom.